Okay, welcome everybody to this month's meetup. Everything seems to be jammed in together lately, but I was really excited about doing this one because I kind of didn't know a lot about MCP servers, Model Context Protocol, and here's their little icon that you'll see everywhere. But I knew that it was everywhere. So it's something that is this noisy in the world of LLMs means that there's got to be some stuff going on. And for me, it's probably going to be one of the most interesting things that's going to happen in LLMs it's almost like every week something interesting happens, but this is definitely something that's in my top 5 now. So basically what we're doing is we're going to have people are calling it the USB of, USB plugins. On the side of your laptop, it's going to be the same as that, but just for LLMs. And the number of MCP servers that are just appearing, like on GitHub or just, when you start Googling them, means that there's a MCP server for almost anything that I can think of. So for me, it's not really the USB. It's more like the Zapier. If you played with the Zapier, it's basically allows your LLMs to talk to the outside world. Previously, when you were doing this, there was a lot of function calls that you had to do in tools, and it could get kind of complicated, especially with OpenAI. And I'm really just focusing on OpenAI. I'm not focusing on any of the other ones. But this, together with the thing that we looked at last month, which was the OpenAI Agents SDK, it's a really easy implementation. And I'll show you some of the examples. I'll show typically what I want to do is, there's coders in this audience, there's non-coders in this audience. So really what I want to do is I want to show the coders what the examples are so that we can get them all up and running. Plus, I also want to show people who want to do some no-code stuff. So I'll show how to do an MCP server with N8N and how to get it. You can basically just go to Reddit, find what people are doing in N8N, and then they're on Gumroad, and then if you can basically download them and install them yourselves. There's obviously security implications here, and I'm not really going to get into that too much, but I just wanted to get people interested in the topic and get them to see different things that are going on. Okay, so here's tonight's agenda. Just a bit of news. Going to look at MCP servers. We're going to keep with the travel agents thing. So I'm going to go do 2 travel agents, one for Airbnb and one for Travelocity. The Airbnb one is the no-code version, and then the Travelocity is the one where I just knocked together this afternoon, and literally knocked together this afternoon, which is great. So you go get the API key, look at the developer documentation, and you have an MCP server. It's running locally on HTTP, or you can do all sorts of things. You can get it to run on your own server, or you can get it to just run on your laptop, and it uses STDIO, standard input output, to get the communication going. So this is like for people who are hardcore coders, they're probably used to doing the functions and the tools themselves. But for people who are not hardcore coders, I think MCP servers it's monumental what it's kind of offering us. Got some resources, bit of learning materials, and then next month what we're going to do is I have a topic. I haven't done voice for a while, so what I want to do is take all the stuff that we've done in the last few months and then focus a little more on the voice side of the OpenAI API. And I'm always into eating your own dog food. So one of the main things that I want to do is I want to do a tool which would allow salespeople to talk to an app on a phone and get that to update the CRM. So CRM is, for those who don't know, it's a client relationship manager. So basically it's what people use to manage you through the sales process. Salespeople are notorious for not updating the CRM. It's one thing they like to sell. They don't like to do the paper or the filling in the CRM. So basically they can talk to somebody and that'll fill it in for them. So I think that's probably what we're going to do next month. And I have a couple other things as well coming up in that sort of vein for some automation stuff. Okay, let's get back to MCP servers though. If I can find my PowerPoints. Another thing I want to do is probably going to be the month afterwards. I'm doing a lot of work with, again, voice. This is 11 labs. So a lot of the talks that I do, you're basically hearing me doing stream of consciousness, talking about all the stuff that we're doing. So what I want to do is I want to make it more professional. And I'm sure a lot of you people want to do as well. So what we'll basically do is take the transcript from one of the YouTubes that I did, put it into 11 labs, and then convert it in a much more professional format, which doesn't have the ums and ahs that I do and then most people do as well. So I think that could be interesting. So that's probably going to be the July event. Okay, news. So new members. So we are every month we seem to be gaining 50 new members. We're just over 600. I think it was 605 the last time I looked. So that's just over 50. So welcome to everyone, new and old. Basically the way this works is I pick a topic, go through it, whatever I think is interesting. Also, if there are people out there who have topics that they want to talk about, that they're experts in, or that they're just really interested in figuring out how it works, you're more than welcome to do a talk to as well. The only thing I would say is I don't want any sales. So if you just have something that you just want to show people, how to do it, let me know and I'll add you to the list. Okay, so this month, what do we get? Well, we got a memory upgrade for ChatGPT. So ChatGPT can now reference all past conversations, which is cool because a lot of times it kind of forgets stuff. If you talk to it for a while, it will just forget what you were talking about because its context, you gone out of its token window. So there's an enhanced memory upgrade now. So it can reference all your past conversations. There was also a weird thing happened where there's, which is very normal in software, but I haven't seen it happen with GPT before, is that there had to be a rollback of one of the upgrades to GPT-4o for Omni. So users were complaining that ChatGPT had become too nice. So basically it was constantly fawning over the users, saying how wonderful they were. And people were going, this is too weird. So OpenAI rolled that back. There is a paper saying why ChatGPT got sycophantic. But basically, it's like I said, it was kind of entertaining. It's like, what? It was just saying, you're the best ever. And it was kind of irritating because it was getting in the way of the conversation. So that's been rolled back. Apparently it's been fixed. Really normal in the rest of the software world, but haven't seen it much in OpenAI. So what is MCP? So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. This is what's been happening up to now for MCP. So we have our LLMs, we have OpenAI, and then we can connect it to, if you know how to connect an API, so you can connect it to Slack, Google Drive. I think I've already seen within ChatGPT that you can, if you're on the web interface, you can connect to Google Drive, but if you want to connect to GitHub, it's a little bit more complicated. But now what's happening is that we have this broker, proxy, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's essentially, it's a middleware object here, which the LLM talks to, and MCP knows how to talk to the LLM. And then with the MCP, we can connect to the same thing, Slack, Google Drive, GitHub. There are so many MCP connections out there at the moment. It's overwhelming. There's dozens and dozens of websites that are collections of different MCPs that will allow you to connect to different things. We have looked, like in the past, I've looked at doing this with functions and tools, and it can get kind of, a bit irritating, because especially with the JSON that you have to put in for the function, I haven't really done that in a long time. But if you're doing it the right way, you define the tool, you give the tool the definition using a function JSON object. Whereas now, if I want to connect to something, I'm just going to look to see if there's an MCP out there. Now, obviously, there is a huge security issue here. So one of the things that I did want to do is I wanted to make sure that people understand that this is not a black box, that you should be able to see what the code is. You should understand what the code is trying to do and understand if it's doing anything extra that it shouldn't be doing. So really, I think that's one of the main goals that we're trying to get today. Yeah, let's talk about what MCP is, but also let's talk about the different components that are there at its most basic, so you can see how somebody else wrote their MCP server and make sure they're not doing anything extra. So this originally came from Anthropic, that's the Claude AI folks, but it's kind of now the de facto connection protocol for most LLMs and most AI IDEs. So you will see it today in OpenAI, but there's, Claude obviously uses it, and then GitHub Copilot uses it, and I'm seeing it in more and more places. As I said before, MCP is described as a USB for LLMs, but for me, I kind of conceptualize them as Zapier for LLMs, although they do kind of replace Zapier to a large extent. So they're an LLM-friendly proxy or a broker to an external service or a database. So it could be a database, could be ODBC, could be RDS, a relational database sitting on AWS, could be anything. And there are lots and lots of MCP servers that people have released to make our applications a lot more plug and play, rather than having to roll your own functions for every external connection. So I could see you kind of doing some vibe coding and then thinking, okay, I want to take in something from the outside world. How do I do that? Well, the way you do that is you connect to an existing MCP server, or you fire up your own. Okay. Like I said, MCP, it's a framework from Anthropic. First time I used it was GitHub Copilot agents. And then now in the last couple of weeks, I've been using it with the OpenAI Agents SDK. The OpenAI Agents SDK, in my opinion, is a really simple implementation the way it uses MCPs. You don't need to use a lot. And there is an easier way to do this if you are not kind of like a Python programmer or a JavaScript programmer, which is we look at the NA-dense stuff. So what do we have? So we have MCP, Model Context Protocol. We have multi-agent collaboration. So typically what it is, one of the first examples that's out there is you have multiple agents, one asking for the weather, one asking to add two numbers, one asking for a secret word. So that's one of the examples we're going to look at. So we'll show how to have multiple agents in our MCP. And then the LLM is smart enough, because it understands the protocol, that it's going to list all the tools that you have in your MCP, and it's going to know what tool to call based on what the person has asked in whatever their prompt is. Tool integration, so seamless external tool invocation, so very good at calling APIs, very good at looking at databases. And then if you do it, you can do it yourself, where you can have some memory in there, so it's got stateful reasoning across interactions. So the example that I had last week when we were last month when we were talking about agents, was that I went to a talk and the person was talking about taking LLMs and getting them to really help with your day-to-day life. So this person worked for Ernst & Young. They were going across to London every quarter. They always did the same thing, stayed in the same hotels, took the same planes, always on Delta or whatever, and then always went to the same airport, went to the plays in Shaftesbury Avenue, went to lunch at the same restaurants, and wanted to meet the people that they should be meeting for their job, for dinner, for lunch, that sort of thing. Well, you would do this now with agents and with MCP. So you had an MCP that would talk to a hotel, TripAdvisor. So we're going to talk about TripAdvisor. We're just looking up hotels, but TripAdvisor will allow you to book. You could also connect it to Kayak. You could connect it to whatever the Shaftesbury-Avenue.com is to start connecting to to order tickets. The same way as you do Broadway in Detroit.com, where I am. So if there's an API that's exposed, you can do it. Even if there isn't an API exposed, you can write a computer use agent to be able to walk through the web browser to do this stuff. So it's pretty cool. So if you have the interest and if you have the time, there's no reason why you can't start not just, looking at these agents, but you can get them to give them the agency to actually do this stuff. Excuse the pun. You can get the agency to make sure that they can go book all these things and do all these things for you and make your life a lot easier. So all the stuff that you would do on a regular basis, I would imagine 3-4 years from now, it's all going to be OpenAI agents, and then or some agents, maybe another framework, and as well as MCPs. Okay. So why do MCP matters? Well, they're beyond chatbots. So it was huge when this LLMs came out. Everybody was also really excited, but quickly realized that LLMs are essentially really good at just guessing the next token. Whereas if you have an agent framework like the OpenAI Agents SDK, together with MCPs, you now have something that's way beyond chatbots that can execute tasks, you can put guardrails in to make sure that it doesn't spend too much money, that you're not going to spend $12,000 going to see Taylor Swift or something, that kind of thing. And then the agents can talk to each other, can maintain context across different sessions, so you can get it to save stuff to a persistent database, whether that's SQLite or whatever ODBC database, to make sure that it's saving whatever your favorites are, like a shared preferences that you would have on Android. And then it builds its knowledge base over time, so you can connect to RAG and all sorts of other things. And so then the back end, because we have a client, so the client can be a couple of different things. Okay, let me just let somebody else in. So the two parts of it, we have a MCP server. So that's where we connect to the outside thing, the outside world. And then we also have an MCP client. So wherever there is a server, there's going to be a client. So the client can be, it could be a website, it could be a front end, it could be N8N, it could be a website that you build for yourself in Flask or whatever, which talks to an agent, which talks to a backend. But within the server itself, it's going to have some sort of state storage, database, workflow management. We're not going to get too much into tool orchestration here, but it's kind of just an introduction to how this all fits together. And then prompt routing is the big thing. So it takes care of a lot of this for you. So if you're asking for the give me the hotels in Houston, it's going to give you a list of hotels in Houston. But if you say, give me the hotels in Houston with which are less than whatever price that are available in the next few days, that have a rating of something else, it's going to take that, whatever your language is, parse it into the appropriate API calls, and make sure that if you're calling TripAdvisor or Kayak or whatever API you are, that you're passing the right information. So when ChatGPT first came out, there was a thing called custom actions, which was part of custom GPTs. And it was only really available to people who paid for ChatGPT Pro. Whereas now you can expose this to anybody you want. So if you have a website or if you have a mobile app, you don't need to worry about people not having access to ChatGPT. So that was always a downside for me with the custom actions. But we're way past that now with agents and MCP. All right, so let's get into what an agent looks like, because I'm more into the code myself. So we have two types of servers. We have an STDIO, which is kind of like a Unix thing, a Linux thing, which it's standard input output. That's what that means. And then the other one that we have is MCP server SSE, which basically means HTTP. So it's, if you want to run it over HTTP, that's the second thing. And we'll show an example of, I'm going to look at this. We have 3 examples that come with on the GitHub repo for OpenAI. And the first 2 are using this STDIO. So NPX is like NPM. So basically you're running an NPM command and you are telling it to talk in the model context protocol and to pull up the server file system, which is the code that we're going to invoke. And we're going to point it at the samples directory, which in this case, what we're doing is it's going to ask a bunch of questions for the files that are in the samples directory. And we also want to get it to list the tools that are in our server file system, MCP, and then that's going to get passed to the LLM, and the LLM will then know what to do with those to answer the questions that you're going to ask it. Okay, so crucial things, STDIO servers, which is running them locally, and it's just basically passing the information on the input-output buffer, so don't have to worry about it. It just takes care of itself. Second one is HTTP. So in this case, it's running localhost, but it can run remotely. So then you can get it pointing at something else, some other domain, some other IP address. And we are telling it that it's an MCP server SSE, which just means the HTTP version. The other thing that we're doing here is, which is great for debugging, is in this case, we're saying, if you remember last month, we looked at agents and there was a trace part of the agents, which told you how the agent was working. So you can also attach your SSE example here to the tracing. So if there's anything that's going wrong with your MCP server or your agent interaction with the MCP server, the tracing within the playground in OpenAI's playground will show you how that all works. And we're just passing a trace ID here too as well. Okay. Next. So we have SDDIO, and then we have the SSE, which for me, my brain says SSE equals HTTP. Okay, and then we define what the agent is. So the agent is, in this case, we're just going to assistant and use the tools to achieve the task. So we have MCP server 1 and MCP server 2. So you can have multiple MCP servers. So think of this as 5, 6, 7, 8 different MCP servers, which all do different things, which all tell the agent within your Python program or your website all of the things that they do via the tools that are available through each of the different MCP servers. And then the agent is smart enough to know which of those tools to be able to call for whatever the prompt that the person asked at the time. So the LLMs are aware of the MCP server's tools, and when the LLM calls a tool from the MCP server, the agent's SDK calls the tool on that server, on the appropriate server. Okay, I think we kind of covered this. So if we want to do it, basically if we want to create our MCP server, there's lots of different things we can do. We can get it to talk to an API, which I think is probably the most common use case at the moment. So we're going to do that with the TripAdvisor API, really basic implementation. We're going to do it with Airbnb's MCP. I'm just going to take one of the MCPs off GitHub that somebody else wrote an N88 workflow for. And then we're just going to basically use that to find different hotels to stay at different places. But you could also use a vector store. So we could have our own database information where, if you think about RAG, retrieval augmented generation, we could also get our MCP to talk to lots of different PDFs that have been embedded and stored in a vector database, and then we can use that to look up information. So taking a lot of the existing information that we had before, and now basically what we're doing is we're putting that within our MCP and making it really easy for the LLM to call it. And then we can also have persistent storage. So we can have just a database that's sitting there, which just could be a relational database with all our sales information in the last year, or it just could be a database which has saved what our preferences are. So it's saved the type of hotels that we like to stay in, or the areas that we want to stay in, or the rating that we want to stay in, or how much we want to pay. Okay, so that's a lot of talk. So I'm going to have a look at a Hello World demo first. So these are from the OpenAI agents. There are 3 examples here. There's a file system one, and there's a Git one. So basically within the Git, you have to download a repo. It's not going out to GitHub to answer questions on the repo. You have to actually just do a Git clone, but there's no reason you couldn't. But the example that they have from the OpenAI agents example is just using a local repo. And then the third one is just to show you how to do a HTTP call using MCP. One of the things that you have to make sure that you have installed before this will be able to work is UV. So UV is yet another package manager. So think of pip or many of the other things out there. So you're going to make sure that you install this. I'm doing everything on a Windows box, but I'm using WSL. I did try and get it to work with PowerShell, and you probably can, but it just was not working too well. So I pivoted and just said, oh, I'll use WSL, and it works great in WSL. So in order to install UV, you got to make sure that you do this command. It's up on astral.sh. So if you want to get some documentation on what UV is as a package manager, that'll work great. And then you just basically run the examples from the top level examples directory and run the main examples. So let me show you. First of all, let's have a look to see what the code looks like so we can see what it's actually doing. So if we go here, so this is the same SDK that we looked at last month. And then there's an examples directory. So if you want to know how to get the agents work, there's a whole different bunch of them. So there's a customer service one, financial research agent, research bot, etc. But within the directory, there are 3 MCP examples. So let's have a look at the file system one first. So there's 3 files, favorite books, To Kill a Mockingbird, 1984, Quite the literary gent, whoever put that in. And then we have favorite cities, so London, Tokyo, San Francisco, etc. And then favorite songs. Okay, so you get the general picture. So what are we going to do with these lists? So this is kind of like a poor man's RAG system. So we have our main.py. Let me see. So where have we defined it? So this is where we've defined it. So we have a file system server. We're using file system, and we have our samples directory, which is the directory that I just showed you. We have the tracing that we set up. And it's going to call, the main is going to basically run our main. And within that, when we call run, because you will see when it's asyncio.run, we have an agent that's defined. So the agent is an assistant, which says use the tools to read the file system and answer questions based on this file, on these files. So list the files it can read, ask about the books, ask a question that reads the reason. So we're saying read the files and list them. So we can list the 3 things. What's my #1 favorite book? Look at my favorite songs. Suggest one new song that I might like. Okay, so let me show you from within WSL if I run that. You just cut and paste this. Yeah, this is all very text-based, so there's no reason why you couldn't do this from a website, but I'm just using the example that OpenAI gave us. So what was my #1 favorite book? To Kill a Mockingbird, I think, was the first one. Yeah, okay, Kill a Mockingbird. Look at my favorite song. Obviously, it's slower than if we were just going to do this using classic LLM. And it bombed at the end. It said, so what it's doing is it's just giving me a song, Don't Stop Me Now by Queen, thinking that you might suggest one song that I might look at. So it's errored out on the last question. No, it hasn't. Okay, yeah, it just didn't end nicely. Okay, so what's the second one? So the second one is a Git example. See the same again. So it's MCP server stdio. And it is basically saying it's using UVX this time instead of NPX. UVX is the command instead of the NPX, NPM. And what are we doing here? So I am going to point it at a Git repo that I just Git cloned. And it's going to say who's the most frequent contributor, and then summarize the last change in the repository. The agent is defined as pointing at an MCP server, which is this MCP server, which is this MCP server here. Okay, cool. So I haven't really added any more intelligence other than that. I will tell you that the repo that I'm using is the one that I used last month, which is this OpenAI Agents. And here we were just going through different agents, Math Tutor, Hello World, all the rest of the stuff that if you haven't seen this, go have a look on YouTube because we got it all there too as well. Okay, so I had to do git clone to get that repo in there, and then what I want to do is run my code. It's going to ask me where is the repo, so I have to tell it where it's stored locally. It's going to think for a second or two. Let's go. Yeah, well, I'm the only contributor, so yeah, I guess I am the most frequent contributor. And then the last change was somebody asked me to put up the results for one of the calls that I did. So I did that. That was the last thing I did. So yeah, it is correct. The commit was add files via upload, new binary file, results.txt was added in this change. Cool. Okay, so that's the second one. So the third one that we're going to look at, a little bit more complicated. So now we have 2 parts to it. So this is the one that is we have the server. So typically in MCPs, what I've seen so far is that everything uses fast MCP to set up our HTTP server. In here, we have we have 3 tools. We have one that's going to add 2 numbers. We have one that's going to go get secret word, and then we have one that's get current weather. So this, like, if you take the debug statements out of here, this is about as hello world as you can get. Okay, and if we go back into our main, you should be getting used to this a bit now. So what we're going to do is we're going to define our server in the main function. It's going to be pointing at this URL. And we have some trace information, so maybe we can look at the trace information in a second. And then it's going to ask, we're going to define the agent pointing at the MCP server, and we're going to say that it's got to choose a tool to do this. It can't do it from just ChatGPT. So it's going to add these numbers. It's going to, what's the weather in Tokyo, and what's the secret word. One of the things I did need to go in here that I forgot is that this is actually calling a HTTP. I haven't seen this before. So it's a weather API. And it's not coming in. Well, that's unfortunate. Normally what it does is it basically, it just tells you what the weather is in the location. It mustn't be able to get the location from my browser just now. All right, let's see if we can get this to work. So again, I'm running it from the top level directory. I'm calling main. Main is going to, in our SSE example, main is going to call the server. So the server is going to get instantiated if it works okay. So there you can see that it's started. If we run it, it's going to process what the tools are. First question was what to add 2 numbers. So it should be doing that. I'll get back to see what the code was. Yep. What's the weather in Tokyo? So get current weather. So it's going to go to the witter.in. And then the last thing is what's the secret word. So we just had a couple of words, and I think it randomly gave you back what the word is. Cool. Okay. The secret word is cherry. So so essentially, they're the 3 examples that we've got. So what do we want to do next? So then I want to continue what we did last month and look at some of the travel agent stuff. It's coming up to summer, time to do some travel. So this is N8N. So this is for the people who don't really do an awful lot of coding, want to get something that works out of the box, or they want to see how it works out of the box and then start hacking it to do whatever they need to do. So N8N, if you haven't used it, it's either in the cloud, you can use it in the cloud. I tend to use it locally, or I use it on my own server because I love all the community workflows that you get. And the community workflows allow you to do lots of different things and connect lots of different items and MCP servers now to allow you to create your own workflow. So in this case, what we're doing is we're saying when a chat message is received, it's going to go and call the client list of tools, and it's going to execute the tool. In this case, my client list is somebody did a Airbnb MCP server, and we're going to integrate that into N8N, and we're going to get Airbnb to tell us what is available in whatever it is that we're going to ask. Let me show you. I think I actually have this one up and running. There's a couple of things that I wanted to show you. First off, here's where I got everything. And this is, I have a resources slide at the end. So if you want to download this yourself and play with it in N8N, basically what you do is you download the workflow. This Alex Safari is the person who created it. There's lots of other examples here as well. It's just the only one that I could find that was part of the Airbnb. And what he's doing is he is calling this Airbnb MCP that somebody else created, which is MCP server for searching Airbnb and getting listing details. So even better. So if we go into Airbnb, or sorry, if we go into N8N, essentially what you do is you have to hook it up by telling it that normally when MCP server started off, you were going to call this within Claude, and Claude basically would have would expect a JSON expression to be able to say NPX, which we saw UVX and NPX in two of the examples. NPX is the one we're using now. It's calling this MCP server B&B, and in this case, it's saying ignore robots.txt. And I think -y is just for whatever the parameters are to say yes automatically. Okay, so we want to run this. So what did I do? So basically, I went to this guy's website, downloaded the workflow, connected my MCP server with my API, and then I can run it saying, find the hotels. So let's say next week. So next week is the exponential show. So lots of us drone guys are going to be in Houston. So let's find an Airbnb to help us. Oh, I didn't want that. I wanted Airbnbs. Okay, we'll have to change that. Okay, so simple memory. So it's putting this information here. It's got my OpenAI chat that's going on. Let me do this instead, because Airbnb does not have hotels. Let's see if it's got any better. So what do we have? We have this is our LLM that we're talking to. So it understands what we're saying, parses it, and puts it in a format that the API can understand. This is the definition of the API, and this is us executing the API. So it's going out to call Airbnb, and it's asking the information and saying, give me all the things. And I think I confused it massively because it didn't actually give me the answers I was expecting. Because I don't want a link to Airbnb rentals. I want everything. Okay, well, whatever. That one's failed fairly miserably. All right, never mind. Okay, so I did get me to Houston. Yeah, but usually what it does is it just lists them. Let me try that one more time. I think you're right too as well. See, Mike, you're the best. Okay. How do I clear the chat? Oh, maybe I've done it now. Okay, let's let that go off in its merry way, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do next, and I'll come back to it. All right, so what if we want to build our own server? So we've looked to see what the examples are. We've looked to see what we can do with N8N. We know that there's an STDIO server, so we can run it locally, or we can do HTTP, so we can basically go and operate it remotely, connect to either a local or remote URL. So what do we need to do? We need to choose our stack. I'm going to use Python. That's what I'm used to. Going to implement context storage. I'm not really too worried about in this case, because really all I want to do is I just want to call an API. So I'm going to, but we could have a vector store, vector database. We could have a relational database, SQLite. We want to create tool interfaces. So I do want to call the Travelocity API. They have an API, you can use it. They charge you if you use over, I don't know, 500 API calls a day. But it's still relatively cheap. And then we're going to define our agent architecture. So we have our agent that's going to call our MCP. And then we have our main and our server. So basically all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the code that we had for the SSE example, and I'm just going to change that to get it to work with the API, with the Travelocity API. It really doesn't like me today. Okay, never mind. The demo gods are not happy. Okay, so if we go to TripAdvisor, so TripAdvisor, yeah, and usually what I do, basically all I do is I just go, give me developer.whatever the domain is.com, and that usually gets me to the API. In this case, it was slightly different, where it's just /developers. You have to set up your account, you have to generate a key. And you, in this case, you actually have to restrict it via an IP. So I am going to show you my key is, because it doesn't really make any difference because you're not on my IP address. Okay, so let's have a look at the code real quick. Let's go back to where we were. So we have MCP TripAdvisor. So if you remembered, we had in our SSE example, we had a main and we had a server. So let's have a look at the server. When I go to the developer documentation, I know that I can call, find everything in a city. I need to pass in my key and I need to pass in the city, and it will give me all the hotels. Obviously, you can do a lot more with TripAdvisor. TripAdvisor is really more so about finding what the reviews are, finding what the what people thought about what was there before, answering questions. But you can also book hotels. So quite a wide and varied API that you can do lots of different things with. Okay, so in this case, all I'm doing is saying, just give me information about the city. I give it the response is give it the URL and give it the headers, and the headers is just saying that accept JSON, and then the transport type is SSE. Within my main, what do I have? This is really slimmed down from what we had before. So we have async, we have our trace, which is on the playground. It checks to see if it's got UV installed. I really just cut and paste what the example was that I had before. And then really all that I'm interested in is setting up my agent. So I set up my agent. I pointed at the MCP server and I just say, call the server, don't do it on your own. And then the message here that I'm passing in, my prompt is list the hotels in Houston. It's going to run that. It's going to call the server. And hopefully in this case, I can get a list of all the hotels in Houston. So let me try that real quick. You will need to make sure that you have your OpenAI API key exported here. So make sure that that's working for you. If that's not working, that's probably what the problem is. And then all that I did was I just copied the code into the examples folder. So it's starting a local host. It's calling my get Houston, get hotels, the city of Houston. And then it's going to give me 4 hotels. So you could narrow things down by saying near the convention center, that sort of stuff. All right. What else do we have? So I've gone and extended what we could do before. So we can call Airbnb. We can call Travelocity. We can do a weather. We can travel. There's no reason why we couldn't get the MCP server for Kayak. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the main point that I'm trying to make here is there are so many MCP servers out there to basically do, I won't say everything that you could possibly think of, but if there's a domain and there's a developer API, somebody is bound to have created a MCP server. So key components, what do we have? So we have our user interface. Could be N8N, could be a website, completely optional, could just be a Python file and we don't have any user interface at all. We have our execution engine, so that's what handles the agent runs. We have our prompt generator, so we could use structured inputs to pass from one to the other to the other. We have our tool router, so executes and manages external tools. And then we have our context manager, which stores and retrieves the agent memory. Okay. In the future, I expect lots more to happen with this. I am very impressed with OpenAI's Agent SDK. They did say it was production ready. And by and large, it's been pretty good. There's the odd time when it's failed. But on retry or do it 2 or 3 times, it usually gets something working. Haven't done anything with streaming yet. We're going to start doing more voice next month. And I suspect what's going to happen is we'll start to be able to go back and do some agent stuff with voices too as well. I do intend next month, what I want to do is basically create my own sales tool, which will allow people to talk to an application, which will update a CRM, customer relationship manager, and which is the bane of everything, all the salespeople out there. So that's what we're going to do next month. Okay, so here's the resources if you want to find out more. So this is the same URL that we had for the Agent-based SDK last month. You just have to go into the examples directory. This is the astral.sh, which is where we can find the UV package manager, which is the replacement for pip. This is the Gumroad, where I found my Airbnb MCP AI agent. There are hundreds of other MCP and workflows out there. So if you got something out there that you're interested in, then I would recommend going out there. They're asking for, some contributions. So, $1 or $2 is probably more than enough. Or if you find something that's going to save you a fortune, give them some money or hire them to do something else. And then tripadvisor.com/developers if you want to find, get an API key and start playing around with the TripAdvisor API too as well. Okay, and with that, I am going to stop the presentation. And I do have a question. I did want to ask, has anybody out there done their own MCP servers that they'd be willing to share or tell us about what that they found interesting about MCP so far? Or are we all newbies? Not getting much out of this. No. Are there any questions that anybody would like to ask about this while we're still here? Sure. Mm-hmm. Yep. So any time that you're rolling your own API call, you should wrap it in an MCP server. Because LLMs understand this protocol the same way that web servers understand the HTTP protocol. So it's going to be able to navigate its conversation correctly if you use an MCP server. Yeah, it's what's the one that I showed you? The one that just had the two files, the main and the server, to go call an API for TripAdvisor. There's 20 minutes to get that working. Probably the hardest thing was to figure out why I couldn't call it because it had an IP address restriction that I didn't realize. So yeah, this is I think it's kind of a fundamental shift to connect LLMs to the outside world, which has been sorely missing, apart from the one example, which is the custom actions within custom chat GPTs, which, like I said, it's got the downside that you have to have a pro license. And custom GPTs, nobody's done anything in that for a while, so it's kind of dead in the vine. So this is cool. This is super cool. Okay.
Yeah, Fadi's here. Maybe it's a repetition, a repeated question of Michael. So I'm not. In the beginning, I was thinking of creating my own server, but then I found that Supabase has an integrated MCP server. So instead of implementing my own, so I'm creating a language application, smart one. So the question is just to confirm what you just confirmed, I guess. If I, my goal is, let's say you eat breakfast in the morning, and you say something to the application, you're able to speak or take a photo. Then we save the data to the database or to the MCP. Will the LLM automatically be detecting the day after, for example, same time, let's say 8 a.m., that I ate breakfast yesterday and I said this sentence in English, for example, or in French, then it will ask me, do you want to repeat this again, or do I need to create some kind of mechanism to achieve that?
You're asking it to remember what it did before, and basically that's Python code. So you would write the Python code to say, save this, or you could write a prompt that would say, pull the information that I did most often and use that as the default mode. So yeah, you can get a prompt to do that, but you would have to save the data.
Yes, yeah, okay, I got you.
You'd have to save the data in a like a vector database, so it would know where to look.
Okay, so anyway, we need to at the end to save the data in the database. So the only difference could be that Can I do this comparison that if I'm saving the data directly to Supabase, it's like I have a notebook and I'm writing things directly to the notebook. But if I use MCP, it's like I have someone in between me and the database, and the MCP is taking care of saving, deleting, updating the data for me.
Yes. Plus, you can also say, just like I said, right at the start, you can say my preferences are. It can learn what your preferences are over time. So if you're doing it multiple times, you saving it to the database, you will put a prompt in there to say, find out the things that I'm doing most often and repeat them, that kind of thing. You can do that within the MCP.
Great, very helpful. Thanks, man.
We got another question. Yeah, where does the vector memory sit if I want to use it for multiple users at separate connecting IPs? So the vector memory would sit in the server.py. So basically you would set up a vector database. There's lots of different ones that you could have. You can have it local, or you could have it in the cloud. There's a couple of vector databases that you can store in the cloud. But if you're connecting to, if you're talking to an MCP server and you make it a SSE, which means that you're connecting over HTTP, so you can create the MCP server on AWS, for example. You could have a vector-based database that's attached to your MCP server, and then the LLM would be talking to your MCP server from whatever IP it wants. So it's like a centralized server, MCP server now, which can be called via a website or via an agent, which could sit anywhere so long as it's connecting to the MCP server. If you give it the URL, the correct URL with the correct port, tell it to SSE, anybody can connect to it, assuming that you allow somebody to connect to it. So it can be as large as whatever your storage is, whatever your vector database could be as large as whatever the storage is on an S3 bucket. It's kind of infinite. It's up to you about how you design your architecture. Maybe we need to do something on vector databases again, because they are super cool. I did do one in the past on creating a recommendation engine. So if you go back and have a look at that, you can find more about vector databases. Okay, hope that helped. And yeah, Eric, if you get stuck, or Fadi, if you get stuck, hit me up. More than happy to talk. Just shoot me an email or send me a message on meetup.com.
Sure, sounds good. Eric, small comments. So you mean if we create our own MCP on the AWS, so we need to structure our own logics and connecting the storage, the database, the security, everything ourselves, and the post-get features. Exactly like we're creating a regular server, but it's our own in this case. So we can control it.
But it's your own in this case, yeah. There is a lot of noise about using other people's MCP servers because people are worried about the security implications of, you need to have access to the code to see what the hell it's doing. So frankly, I'm such a I'm so paranoid that I would much prefer to roll my own as opposed to, or at least be able to see what the code is to be able to see what it's doing. And I think that's really what I'm trying to do here is here are the pieces that do the work. So make sure these are the only pieces that are in the code that somebody gives you, and there's not extra stuff that's charging you more. So are they doing extra calls to LLMs where they don't need to, because it's slower. You can see it's slower than LLM, so it's going to be more expensive. Okay.
True.
All right. Cool. Great questions. Thank you very much. Okay, so next month we're going to do my pet project, which is get my salesperson to update his CRM so he has no excuse, and look forward to seeing you then.